Hi and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be a wrap up of all the books that I've read in October, and I'm finally up to date, so hopefully this video will be a bit shorter because I'm not having to backtrack as long and talk about tons and tons of books. I've got 5 to talk about today, so I'm just going to get on with it because I want this video to be as short as possible while still knowing that I ramble on a little bit. So yes, without further ado, here's the books. So the first book that I read this month was One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest by Kesey, I think is how you'd say it. So basically on my Goodreads I have my to be read list, and some of the books have been on there for about 10 years and I just never get round to them because I keep finding new books that are more exciting at the time that I will read instead. So I've been making an effort to go back and read some of the books that I've added on there a long time ago that I don't know, I just keep seeing, not picking up, scrolling past them on my Kindle. So this month I thought it was finally time that I read One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and it was actually quite good timing because Netflix just released their show Ratched, and I didn't even know that that was based on One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest until I was reading it and I googled something about it and it just kept coming up with this Ratched, and I was like, that's really odd timing that I've just picked it up now after wanting to read it forever and that this Ratched show's out. So anyway, tangent, but yeah, this is one of those modern classics again that I do like to pick up every so often. There's a film adaptation that a lot of you probably have already seen and it's got Jack Nicholson in it, and I really want to watch it, so I'm really excited to watch it now that I've read it. So I really like this book. I gave it a 4 out of 5. It's probably one of my favourite like modern classics now, I guess. It's basically set at a psychiatric mental health institution in Oregon in America, and this ward in particular is run by Nurse Ratched, who is really quite manipulative and she's got a really mean streak, and she keeps all of her patients in line with the threat of electric shock therapy. They give them medication that like alters their mind and their perception, and then one day this character called McMurphy is brought into the institution, and instantly he's very charming, he's very loud and he's funny, and he decides that he doesn't want to follow Nurse Ratched's rules and he basically wants to take over the ward and get all the patients involved as well. So I really liked this book. I really liked Kesey's writing, and there were moments in this book where I was actually like laughing out loud, which is quite rare. I don't often laugh out loud at books, so that was really good. It feels very like mischievous and there's lots of like little jokes that they make against Nurse Ratched, and yeah, it was just quite a fun read, I guess. I really liked the character of McMurphy. I thought he was really interesting, he was really complex, and he's definitely very flawed, but he's still super likeable, and I felt myself being like on his side against Nurse Ratched. And I also really was quite upset by the ending. It didn't end how I would have wanted it to end, and although that was more impactful and it definitely made like a statement, I just didn't want it to end that way. So it did get me quite sad, but I appreciated how it ended, I guess. I liked a lot of the discussion in this about what is defined as mentally ill, what is defined as sane, society versus mentally ill people and how they are repressed and maybe manipulated into certain things. Yeah, it was just really interesting, and it's definitely one of my new favourite classics, and I can't wait to watch the film now that I've read it, so yeah. Also apologies if the light changes in this video. I was meant to film this a little bit earlier in the day and it's now getting late and I'm kind of scared that it's going to get dark, but hopefully it's all okay for now. So the next book I read was Forbidden by Tabitha Suzuma, and oh my god, this book literally destroyed me for a short time. Once I finished this book I actually stopped reading for a week because I just couldn't stop thinking about this book. I was so upset about this book. It really affected me in ways that I didn't expect it to, I guess. So this is a bit of an unusual book and I'm wary that some people just won't be interested in this whatsoever, but it's a forbidden romance and it's about a brother and sister who fall in love. And hear me out, it is weird, but I think if you go into it with an open mind, I think it can be a very powerful read, and it's definitely very thought-provoking, and it's made me reevaluate some of my pre-existing perceptions about consensual incest. So basically, it's a bit weird to talk about, I guess, because I know some people are just going to be like, oh no, disgusting. But it basically follows this brother and sister called Lachlan and Maya, I think it's Maya. And they are basically acting as parents to their 3 younger siblings because their mum is absent. She's basically drunk all the time. She spends way more time with her boyfriend than she does her children, and their father left when I think they were at a very young age, so they're basically left on their own a lot of the time. Because of this unusual family dynamic that's going on, Maya and Lachlan are acting as mum and dad. They start to realise that maybe they like each other more than they should as brother and sister, and the story just goes on from there. So this book was so damn good. It is one of my new favourites of all time. It was written very beautifully. Even from the first page, it's talking about like flies trapped behind a window or something, like trying to get out, and the way she wrote it was just so good that I was like, I'm gonna love this book. I don't care about the subject matter. She's just a really nice writer, and it's just full of all these beautiful quotes that, oh, I don't know, it was just so good. But for obvious reasons, it's very sad because it is an incestuous relationship, and obviously society's against it, the law's against it. There's never going to be any way that these two would be able to be together. It's just a really, really sad story. I was literally crying so hard at the end. I was just wailing, like actually hyperventilating, crying. I had to put the book down after certain lines because I was just crying so hard. And yeah, it was just miserable, but it was so powerful, it was so impactful, it was very emotional. It raised a lot of questions about, you know, who are we to say that certain relationships are wrong if they are consensual, they're not hurting anybody. Obviously there's the like biological aspect that says that incest is wrong, and I completely get that, but it was just a very interesting read, and it did make me think about, you know, how we as society view incest, I guess, and how it's against the law. And yeah, it was just very interesting, and it was so good, and I will definitely be reading more of Tabitha Suzumi's other work because it was just beautiful and very sad. And I've never read anything like that before. I feel like it was a very brave story to write, because obviously it could get a lot of backlash. I know some people that might watch this video might be like, that's not for me, I'm not interested, but I do think it's not like a sleazy, gross portrayal of, you know, some sort of weird fantasy. It raised a lot of questions about whether Maya and Lachlan would have even felt this way had they not been forced into acting like the mum and dad of the family. And it's a lot about this struggling family, fighting poverty and not having the proper mum and dad there, struggling to eat. You know, these kids are basically having to parent their children, so they've come home from school and now they're having to make the tea, make sure they do the homework, put them to bed and all this. And I felt the stress and the pressure, and I think Lachlan in particular is just a really likeable character. You really get a deep insight into what he's thinking and how he knows that it's wrong, what's going on. At the end, I was just really rooting for these two, even though I knew that wasn't the point of the story, but I did find myself rooting, and I was like, let these two be together. So yeah, basically give it a read. If it sounds something that you would be interested in and that you would be able to remain like open-minded about, then I definitely recommend this one, and I think it's such a good book, but be prepared to be upset. The next book I tried to read was Strange Weather by Joe Hill, and if you know me, you'll know that I really hate strange weather. I used to have quite a lot of nightmares about tornadoes and hurricanes and things like that, so I hate all like natural disasters, and if the sky's a funny colour, I'm not about that. So I thought, because it was Halloween, I thought I would read something a bit scary and a bit creepy that is playing on my existing fears. So yeah, I thought I'd give this one a go. It's basically a collection of 4 short stories, all based around some sort of strange weather, and it's meant to be creepy, horror, that sort of vibe. So I ultimately DNF'd this book after 2 stories because it just wasn't what I was looking for. I wanted something to really terrify me, shit me up, and this just didn't, unfortunately. So the first story that I read in this book was called Snapshot, and although it was very creepy, and I liked the weather aspect in this because it was just this horrible rainstorm. I feel that it peaked way too early, about the halfway mark, and then everything after that I was just really bored by. And to say that I was bored by a short story isn't a good thing, because that's another point though. I thought that these stories were way too long. They could have been much shorter, in my opinion, especially Snapshot. I just thought like the latter half of it could have been told much more succinctly. Yeah, I give it like I think a 2.5 out of 5. And then the second story that I read in this collection was called Loaded, and this one was, it's hard to kind of say what it's about without spoiling anything, but there's a lot of focus on guns. I liked how it started. The weather aspect in this story was a lot less prominent because it was a wildfire that was like slowly getting more dangerous as the story went on, but this story felt a lot more like an anti-gun propaganda type story, or like a warning, a cautionary tale against having guns, than it did like a horror. And I was just in the mood for it, like a full-on horror, so it was okay, but I just thought it was like meh. And then I saw some other reviews that said that that was the best story in the collection by far, and I was like, okay, I'm not in the mood for this. Maybe I'll pick it up again and read the last two someday, because they are short, but I just feel like they're so long for like short stories. I think they're more like novellas. So yeah, wasn't really what I was in the mood for, and I probably wouldn't really recommend that one, so yeah. After my disappointing ride with Strange Weather, I looked to my TBR for something that would be truly horrifying, and boy did I find it in The Troop by Nick Cutter. Yes, so oh my god, that story is horrifying, grotesque, disgusting, vile. Oh wow, I'm a changed woman after reading that book. It was amazing though. I literally thought it was perfection. I couldn't tell you any faults about that book whatsoever. It was all spectacular. I was truly horrified and terrified by the situation. It's basically about this group of 5 scouts and their scoutmaster as they go to a island off the coast of their hometown on this like scouts adventure, like a weekend away survival trip thing. And while they're there, this guy turns up who is quite hideously disfigured and scary looking, and they don't know what's wrong with him. Turns out he's got this horrifying infection or virus that poses a great threat to the rest of the people on the island. So this has so much gross body horror, it's a joke. It put me off my food. I couldn't eat when I was reading this book. Everything just felt disgusting. I wanted to like disappear at times because I was just so, what am I reading? But wow, it was the best. It was just what I needed. I really wanted some like scary Halloween stuff, and this was so scary. But it wasn't just like, it felt like so much more than a horror. It had these like newspaper clippings in it, and like lab reports that were equally as terrifying and made the situation even more scary. And it had like interview transcripts as well that just added an extra layer of like why this was happening and who was behind it, and like the motivations going on, the political things going on outside of the island, like before and after this incident happens on the island. And oh my god, it was just so good. But you will want to just crawl out of your own skin, I think. Like, it's just disgusting. Be prepared for this if you want to go into it, but I would recommend this to anybody with a strong stomach because it was just so damn good. It also has a lot of like Lord of the Flies vibes, I thought, because it's about like the survival of these young boys, and the psychology of the boys and the group dynamics was really interesting to me. There's one particular boy that is just the worst character ever, but for his personality, not the way he was written. He was written really good, but oh, he's just horrible to read about. And it was just so interesting. Loved it. Will always look for more Nick Cutter books now because that was just amazing. Can I go on about it even more? Who knows? And lastly this month I read The Perfect Wife by JP Delaney, and I just needed a thriller book because it's me after all. I need to read a thriller every few books because that is my favourite genre. The plot of this book is 5 years ago, this woman called Abby Scott Collins went missing and nobody knows what happened to her. And her husband Tim is really high up in this tech company, and he makes an AI version, like an artificially intelligent robot version of his wife, and that is our protagonist. So like the AI Abby is our protagonist, and he brings her home and they're just meant to live this happy married life now that they're like reunited. And he's managed to put like Abby's, like the old Abby's memories into this AI. So although she knows that she's like a robot, she has all the memories that Abby had, with certain blocks, I guess, on things that she can't remember. The AI Abby starts realising things about the disappearance of Abby 5 years ago, and yeah, it just spirals on from there. I really did enjoy this book when I was reading it, and I read it in 2 sittings. It really hooked me in straight away, and I loved the whole AI aspect of it, so I thought it was really good until I got to the ending, and honestly, I didn't know what happened. I was so confused, and I was looking online to be like, what just happened? On like the Goodreads like forums and stuff. Nobody else seemed to know what happened. Like, there were so many people that were like, what? It was confusing because there was like a second person perspective in this story. So when it got to the end and it was using this second person, like, you did this, I didn't know who was doing what. And there was also this unnamed narrator that was interspersed throughout the book that was talking about the relationship between Abby and Tim, you know, 5 years ago, and how they like started seeing each other and like getting married and stuff, and you don't know who that is. So it just all got a bit confusing towards the end. And then once I finished it, I was just thinking, I wish that that unnamed narrator had been replaced with just the old Abby, because I know it might be just typical, but I think the book would have benefited from the reader hearing about old Abby's thoughts and feelings and the events that were going on leading up to her disappearance. I think the book just would have made more sense that way, and it would have provided a bit more insight, especially when you start learning more about certain characters. I was just thinking, like, I don't get what happened 5 years ago. I don't know why. I don't know. So, not a fave. I think I ended up giving it like a 3.5 because I really liked it up until the end, and then I was like, there was some issues there. And I'm sorry it's so dark because it's still kind of light outside, but obviously not in here. So that's the end of this month's wrap up. So out of the 5 books that I read, or if you're going to count Strange Weather because I only read half of that, I found 2 new all-time favourites, so that's incredible. So if you're going to take anything from this video, if you like the sound of The Troop or Forbidden, definitely read those. Incredible new favourite books. I've just started reading A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara, so prepare for a reading vlog and pray for me because that book is meant to be heartbreaking. So yeah, I will see you in my next video. Goodbye.